Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Mam. Our stories today: President Trump will host a Board of Peace meeting tomorrow. The White House has more on the progress made on rebuilding Gaza and negotiating a deal with Iran. 8 skiers have been found dead and 1 is still missing following an avalanche in California. The local sheriff provided updates on the search and rescue operation. The U.S. Labor Secretary says a strike team will soon investigate California fraud. The investigations would be similar to Minnesota's. We're now in the 3rd week of the search for Nancy Guthrie, and so far thousands of tips haven't led authorities to a suspect or the missing grandmother. The Pima County Sheriff says they're not giving up, though. The FDA says it will now review Moderna's new mRNA flu vaccine after earlier raising testing concerns. NYPD found an injured American bald eagle trapped on ice in the Hudson River. The phenomenal rescue has since gone viral on social media.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
The U.S. Department of Labor is investigating California's Employment Development Department. In a statement to the California Post, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer said, "Immediately, we are engaging a specialized strike team to uncover any potential fraud or abuse and quickly moving to protect the American worker and taxpayers." She added, "I look forward to restoring the California unemployment insurance program's integrity and financial health." She claims that the previous presidential administration turned a blind eye at the labor programs. The probe will be similar to the Minnesota fraud investigations. California still owes $20 billion to the federal government for unemployment insurance claims during the COVID-19 pandemic. The debt is being shouldered by employers. Now we have sad news coming out of California. 8 skiers have been found dead a day after an avalanche hit the Sierra Nevada near Lake Tahoe.
Total of the 15 that were on this guided trip, they were 9 women and 6 men. We were able to rescue 1 man and 5 women. So the survivors, ranging in ages from 30 to 55 years of age. 8 of the 9 additional skiers have been located deceased. We are still looking for 1 of the members at this time.
2 of the survivors were immobile due to their injuries when they were found. 1 of them has been discharged from the hospital, and 1 is still being treated at the hospital. Both their injuries are non-life-threatening. Search and rescue teams are still in the process of trying to recover the bodies of the deceased victims. They believe the 1 remaining missing skier is presumed dead. Authorities have yet to identify them and their cause of death.
8 have been found at the location. So far, due to the terrain, it's vertical in nature. They were only able to remove the individuals that had survived and needed medical care last night. The actual decedents are still located in the avalanche area. Where the decedents are placed, we did our best to put them in an area that we can recover. We have put avalanche poles there. We've done everything we can to make it so that, given the opportunity, we can get in and do a fast recovery. If the weather gives us that chance, but again, it's going to depend on how the weather goes for the next couple of days.
The Nevada County Sheriff says 15 people were on a backcountry skiing tour, including 4 guides and 11 clients. It was the 3rd and last day of the tour when the avalanche hit yesterday. The guide company has been cooperating with the investigation. Search and rescue crews have to work through extreme weather conditions, including heavy snow and gale-force winds. Authorities are urging the public to check avalanche forecasts and weather reports before traveling anywhere in the backcountry. Their message is avoid all closed areas and high-risk areas. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is testifying today in a landmark social media trial in Los Angeles. The case is one of more than 1,000 lawsuits accusing Meta and Google of designing addictive features that harm young users. Zuckerberg is facing grieving families in court today. His testimony comes 2 years after he faced sharp questioning on Capitol Hill. NTD's Christina Corona reports.
So you didn't take any action. You didn't take any action. You didn't fire anybody. You haven't compensated a single victim. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for anything that you've done. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
Several parents who say social media played a role in their children's deaths are expected at the courthouse again this week. One father says his 17-year-old son died by suicide in 2022 after being coerced into sending explicit images on Instagram.
Social media is an absolute addiction for young people at many different levels. It's not just about sextortion for us in this fight anymore. There's fentanyl parents here. There's suicide videos that are getting fed to these young people that are just looking for self-help and looking for an answer. And they're getting fed suicide videos. How to?
Another mother says her 17-year-old daughter died from fentanyl poisoning after she had allegedly received laced drugs from someone she met on Instagram.
I don't know how they live with themselves. They have children. They don't allow their children to be on social media. I don't know how Mark Zuckerberg can live with himself knowing that his hands are bloody.
Meta and Google deny the claims. Instagram chief Adam Mosseri also testified last week, pushing back against the idea that problematic social media use meets the clinical definition of addiction. Christina Corona, NTD News.
President Trump will host a Board of Peace meeting at the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace in D.C. tomorrow. The White House has more on the president's plan.
He will announce that member states have pledged more than $5 billion towards the Gaza humanitarian and reconstruction efforts and have also committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police to maintain security and peace for Gazans.
The White House says over 20 countries will attend the meeting. The president will deliver opening remarks and give more details about the $5 billion investments. And Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says a bit of progress was made after U.S. and Iranian delegates met in Geneva, Switzerland yesterday, but the two sides are still very far apart on some issues. She says she believes the Iranians will come back to the U.S. side with more details in the next couple of weeks.
The president has always been very clear, though, with respect to Iran or any country around the world. Diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration. He's talking to many people. Of course, his national security team, first and foremost, and you know who the members of that team are. And this is something, obviously, the president takes seriously. He's always thinking about what's in the best interest of the United States of America, of our military, of the American people, and that's how he makes decisions with respect to military action of any kind.
President Trump posting on Truth Social just moments ago that should Iran decide not to make a deal, it may be necessary for the U.S. to use Diego Garcia in order to eradicate a potential attack by Iran. He's referring to the British island in the Indian Ocean that's home to a U.S. military base. The UK recently decided to hand over control of the island to the African nation of Mauritius. Trump is opposing the handover, saying it's a big mistake and a blight to the UK. The president continues to urge the UK not to give up the island. Joining us to discuss is Gerard Filitti, foreign affairs analyst specializing in the Middle East. He's also an attorney specializing in international law. So good afternoon, Gerard. This meeting, Board of Peace meeting tomorrow, it's going to bring together more than 24 nations to rebuild the Gaza Strip. I'm wondering, what would you like to see from this meeting? Perhaps more concrete details and timelines?
That's absolutely right. What we're looking to see is more detail in terms of a timeline and details when we can expect reconstruction to begin, what we can expect to see happen on the ground in Gaza. Because right now, the biggest problem is that even though we do have this commitment from 20 countries, even though there is $5 billion plus that's been raised for reconstruction efforts, Hamas still has its weapons. Hamas still militarily controls Gaza. So it's very difficult to see how you implement reconstruction while you still have a terrorist entity that's on the ground in Gaza.
Okay, so that's one concern. Any other concerns you might have right now about the Board of Peace, whether it can, really effectively reconstruct Gaza and maintain peace?
I think that there is good optimism that the Board of Peace can, because if you look at who is a member of it, you have most of the Middle Eastern countries that have a stake in peace and stability in the Middle East. You have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, UAE. All of these countries are part of the Board of Peace. So they have a vested interest in calming the temperature because they don't want to see more war. They don't want to see a detriment of people or economies in the region. So they have a motivation to make sure to push through so that the people in Gaza understand that they need to be a part of this process. The biggest hindrance may be the United Nations, which is meeting tomorrow ahead of the Board of Peace meeting. So we have yet to see how the United Nations will receive the proposals by the Board of Peace.
So as you mentioned, 20 countries here in the Board of Peace, some priorities align and some perhaps may not align exactly. What is your analysis on Gaza's governance and how that might evolve with the involvement of the Board of Peace?
I think that is a key piece because we want to see a transition to a stable, more democratized Gaza, where the people have a say in who runs their country and it's not a terrorist organization. And when you do have regional actors like the Saudis, like the Kuwaitis, like the Qataris, the Egyptians and the Turks, all of whom have connections and relationships with various factions in Gaza, that is more promising that people will be able to sit down and work out a different board, if you will, a government body for Gaza that will be able to take on an increasing role in managing the affairs of that country. So there's more optimism that that can actually happen precisely because of the composition of the Board of Peace involving countries that are important in the area.
So, what do you think about the long-term outlook for this group, this Board of Peace? There are a lot of countries in it right now, but I have to bring up that a number of U.S. allies, some are major U.S. allies, not joining this Board of Peace. I mean, what would happen to the Board of Peace after Trump leaves office? So maybe you can talk to us about some of these concerns.
Well, that's a really good question, and I think a lot of them will be answered by what happens specifically within Gaza in the next few years. The Board of Peace is set up, it's meant to be something that addresses more than just Gaza, that's meant to stabilize different conflicts in the world. But whether or not that is possible will depend on what happens in the next few years within Gaza. And while European countries like the United Kingdom, like France, like Germany have not yet joined, they've said no to joining at this time, the door remains open for them to come in at a later point in time if they see that the Board of Peace is actually having a good effect. So this reluctance by some European countries, more traditional allies of the United States, if you will, does not mean that they won't be involved further down the road.
So how does this Board of Peace fit into the equation where the United Nations exists? Talk to us about the bigger picture here.
I think specifically when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the West Bank, the conflict between Israel and Palestine, the United Nations has shown itself to be ineffective for many, many years, going back decades. If anything, we've seen during the war with Gaza that UNRWA, that United Nations personnel were actually involved in terrorist atrocities. We've seen that the United Nations, even with Hezbollah in Lebanon, has been facilitating the positioning of terrorists for terrorist attacks against Israel. So the United Nations has not been very effective at keeping the peace. It's kept the people of Gaza in a state of perpetual dependency on Hamas because of policies that were meant to punish Israel instead of promote the improvement of the economy. So really what we're seeing now is a different approach. We're seeing outside factors. We're seeing a new group, the Board of Peace, coming in, hopefully to succeed where the United Nations has failed. The United Nations still has a role to play in the region more generally, but when it comes to the reconstruction of Gaza and peace in the Middle East, the United Nations has not done a good job of it, and maybe it is time to see what the Board of Peace can do.
So on that point, you're saying that the United Nations has been ineffective in certain aspects. Can the Board of Peace be an alternative to the UN?
I think it absolutely can. When you look at the United Nations and its mandate, what it has really done over the years is provide aid, meaning that it enabled people to subsist, to have food and water, to have basic necessities, but not to build up their economies, not to build up a democratic country, not to thrive in the region. So the Board of Peace is dedicated towards that end. It's meant specifically to improve the lives, the conditions, the governments of the region. So that is what is fundamentally different, is this is a board that's investing serious money into uplifting the economy and the people, where the United Nations, all it did was try to keep things stable and as is.
Okay, with the time left, there's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that is what Vice President J.D. Vance said about Iran talks. specifically that Iran was ignoring Washington's red lines related to its nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program. So what are Iran's intentions when it comes to its nuclear program?
I think Iran has spelled out its intentions for many years now and has played a cat and mouse game with the United States and the West. It keeps promising to come to the table and negotiate, but all it really wants is to continue developing its nuclear power, continue to enrich uranium to a point that it is almost military grade, and continue not and rescind sanctions so that it can use money from the West, from sales of oil, in order to rebuild its economy, further develop its military ambitions, and provide for terror support in the region. We're not really seeing a fundamental change in Iran. The only thing that's different now is that we have the United States that is resolved to take military action if Iran does not come to an agreement. Will there be an agreement? It's hard to tell at this stage. It does not look promising, but that's not to say that they're not trying to come to an agreement.
Okay, so then what's next? If Iran is not willing to compromise enough, let's say, and Washington is holding firm on its red lines, where does that leave us?
I think that leaves us to a position where we may very well see military action against Iran. What form of military action, that remains to be seen. It can be something like we saw last summer, targeted strikes against nuclear facilities, against enrichment facilities, against the sites that are used to build ballistic missiles. But it could also be broader than that. It could target the government itself and other military installations in order to give the Iranian people the chance to rise up and take over their country. As we've seen since December, there's been a growing pressure with demonstrations and protests against the government and a brutal humanitarian crackdown that shows the people of Iran want change. So what we will see militarily can range from similar strikes to what we saw last year to a decapitation of the Iranian government so that the people could take it back.
Okay, just one final thing, Gerard. You brought up the ballistic missiles. What do you think is the likelihood that the U.S. will get Iran to limit its ballistic missiles?
Iran is always claiming that these missiles are for peaceful purposes. Believe it or not, they want to launch satellites with these missiles, which is not what they're really for. They're meant to threaten Europe and the United States more directly by developing missiles that can reach us. So I think for the United States, Iran's ability to develop ballistic missiles, to have ballistic missiles and nuclear fuel refined beyond a certain point is a non-starter. It will continue to be a red line for the United States, and I think President Trump is in a very difficult position to cede ground on that, especially because he was so critical of the Obama-era nuclear deal, which did not really result in any change in Iran.
I just had to chuckle a little bit. You said Iran wants to use the ballistic missiles to send satellites. But anyway, great comments, Gerard, today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
HHS Secretary RFK Jr. advocating for giving children sauerkraut and is reviewing America's baby formula guidelines. Joining us to discuss is Valerie Huber, founder and president of the Institute for Women's Health. So good afternoon, Valerie. So Kennedy is telling parents to add fermented foods to their children's diets. Tell us the benefits of such food, including sauerkraut.
Yeah, well, you know, what I really appreciate about what Secretary Kennedy is doing is wanting to move America from a sick care culture to an actual healthcare culture. And while it might seem funny on its face, there's actually science behind this recommendation. It's real, it's fascinating, and we've seen a number of studies that link an interesting phenomenon, which is there is a bacterium found in fermented foods, whether it's sauerkraut or yogurt or other similar things, that play a direct role in regulating mood and anxiety, stress, and how our body is affected by that. And when it's depleted, then that anxiety and stress seems to rise. And when it's present, when it's present, we're just more resilient. So Secretary Kennedy is pointing to some genuine science here.
So how much of these fermented foods should be added to a child's diet? What is the balance?
Well, I think the important thing that we know is this. Sauerkraut, for example, might not be on everyone's grocery list, but it's not expensive and it has real health benefits. But we can't kid ourselves. Diet alone isn't going to fix everything. But look at where our young people are today. We have really a confluence of things that have just been building and building, where we see depression and stress so high in youth. Children are eating ultra processed foods. They're on their screens for hours a day. They're disconnected from family meals. Their gut health is suffering. Their mental health is suffering. This is an important part of a holistic, something that needs to be addressed really holistically. We call it optimal health, and it's an important piece of it.
Okay, so there's another topic I want to get into, but let me ask one final question on this. You're talking about a holistic approach to children's health. Maybe just give us what do you think is the most important tip you can give to parents who want to improve their children's health?
Well, first of all, something that we call health literacy is really important. I think Secretary Kennedy is focusing on primary prevention, which is a public health model that can become a framework, not just for a specific administration, but how we look at health. And I think what's really important for parents to recognize is we can't just treat problems. We have to look at holistic health, which is not just physical health, but it's mental and emotional and social and spiritual health. And the research is just replete that if you miss one of those aspects of health, you're going to have a hard time with a thriving life as a result. And so starting with healthy food is a good start, but it's really only a start.
Right, I hear you. Okay, so let's talk about America's baby formula, because Kennedy has questioned its quality. Can I just ask you, where do you stand on the safety and quality of U.S. formulas right now?
Well, it's not an opinion. There's been quite a bit of research coming out. I'm pretty sure that it was Consumer Reports, which was saying upwards of 40+% of formula that's been tested. There are some levels of harmful substances within it. However, there are formulas that had none of that. So that tells us that it's possible to create baby formula that does not have the contaminants that Secretary Kennedy has been talking about. It also is really important to contextualize this. If an infant is getting 100% of their nutrition from baby formula for half of the first year of their life, we need to get this right. And it's right for parents to ask those hard questions. And I'm very happy that we're looking at something that has been, I think, long overdue in the making.
And as well, where do you stand on seed oil? Kennedy also questioned whether seed oil should be used.
Yeah, that's a complex issue, and I am not an expert on the science there. What I do appreciate is that there is a discussion, but more than a discussion, there is a real effort to look at the science behind that, and I think that is going to give us some information that we don't have now. And it may say that seed oils are fine. It may say that seed oils are not. There seems to be conflicting evidence. And like other Americans, I really want to get to the bottom of that. But what we do know, and there's no question at all about, are the contaminants that are unnecessarily in formulas. There have been recalls as a result of that, and I think that is an important place to start.
So the FDA has been directed to conduct the first full review of infant formula nutrients. The current FDA nutrient requirements formula date back to the late 90s. Right. How do they stack up against modern research? Maybe just briefly comment on this as well.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point here. Much has changed in the last few decades. We've learned more about what is important for nutrition for infants, and we have learned things that we used to take as gospel truth that we no longer do. And so in that 40 years, there's been, for example, a real emphasis on the importance of breastfeeding, if at all possible, and what can be gained by that. Well, in baby formula, it's time to take another look. And again, I'm not an expert on all of the research regarding baby formula, but I think if we just look overarching at health for infants, health for every age across the lifespan, what we know is that good nutrition is really important to overall health. And we can't just look at the here and now, and we can't merely treat disease. We need to look more prospectively, and that's where optimal health comes in.
Valerie, you've been so helpful today. I just have one more question I would like to ask you to help put this into perspective a bit more. How does our baby formula, the U.S.'s baby formula, compare to other countries?
Wow. I do not know the answer to that, so I don't want to authoritatively speak to it, but I do know that as I have traveled to other countries, oftentimes the requirements are not as stringent, especially in the developing world. And so I think that what is really important that can come out of this is not only how we need to look at things here in the United States, but also those things that we export to other countries, not just our country, but around the world. Everyone looks to the United States in our research. Our CDC has locations around the world, and I suspect that we have a conversation that has now begun, thanks to Secretary Kennedy, that is not going to only impact the here and now, but hopefully for generations to come. And it will also be a springboard for those conversations in countries around the world.
Right. He definitely started these conversations, and that is very important. Valerie, such important information you gave us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
The director of the National Institutes of Health is taking on an additional role. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya will serve as acting director of the CDC until a permanent nominee is confirmed, according to the White House. He steps in after Jim O'Neill departed the agency recently and is expected to be nominated to lead the National Science Foundation. The leadership shift follows the earlier removal of former CDC Director Susan Moneras, who clashed with Health Secretary RFK Jr. over revisions to the childhood vaccine schedule, changes that scaled back some routine recommendations. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says today it will now review a new mRNA flu vaccine from Moderna. Earlier this month, the FDA refused to accept the application, citing concerns about how the vaccine was tested, though the company says the FDA did not raise any concerns about safety or effectiveness. Moderna later met with regulators and proposed a revised approval plan based on age. The company is now seeking full approval for adults 50 to 64 and accelerated approval for those 65 and older, with an additional follow-up study. If approved, the vaccine could be available for adults 50 and up for the upcoming flu season. An ICE operation turns deadly after an illegal immigrant flees. A Guatemala national was speeding away from a traffic stop in Georgia Monday when he crashed into another vehicle, killing a local teacher. Oscar Vasquez Lopez was arrested following the incident. He faces first-degree homicide by vehicle, reckless driving, driving without a valid license. A senior department official released new evidence yesterday as supports U.S. allegations that China conducted an underground nuclear test in June 2020. The Assistant Secretary of State spoke at an event hosted by the Hudson Institute.
We've already seen China recycle long-standing statements about arms control that attempt to shift primary responsibility for progress on Russia and the United States. All the while, Beijing rapidly builds up toward parity. As an aside, I'd ask, is it parity with the United States? Is it parity with Russia? No one knows. They've been using these lines in tactic for several decades. Frankly, I think the rest of the world has been enabling this behavior by giving a pass to those that make this argument. But for those who buy the narrative, let me ask, do you really think that the People's Republic of China will be incentivized toward meaningful arms control after they've already achieved parity or better? I think we know the answer to that question.
He says China tried to hide the 2020 underground nuclear test by detonating the device in a spacious underground cavity to diminish seismic waves. The U.S. earlier this month accused China of performing such secretive nuclear arms tests and implementing measures to restrict seismic evidence. China is a signatory to the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, but not a ratifier. It rejected the initial U.S. accusation at an international conference this month. Beijing's last acknowledged underground test occurred in 1996. And don't miss President Trump's first State of the Union address of his second term next Tuesday. The president is expected to cover the most pressing issues of our day, from the economy to achieving peace abroad, and he'll reveal his yearly plan to Congress, the nation, and the world. Join NTD's Tiffany Meyer, Steve Lance, and Mari Otsu at 7 p.m. Eastern to track the president ahead of his speech, hear reactions from lawmakers, and speak with panels on what it all means. Don't miss it. An American bald eagle rescue is going viral. New York City Police Department posted the Tuesday rescue to social media. NTD's Sean Marshall has more details.
An American bald eagle was trapped on ice in the Hudson River Wednesday morning.
His claw's bleeding too.
New York City Harbor Unit officers spotted the injured eagle while patrolling the river. The eagle could be heard calling out for help. NYPD posted the miraculous rescue to their social media, and the post went viral. Officers wasted no time and quickly used an animal control catch pole to gently lift the injured bird into a tarp and safely onto the boat. One ex-comment says, "So cool, some of the unspoken good deeds you guys do every day. Thank you from all of us New Yorkers." Another commenter said, "God bless you for doing this. The love we show to animals, especially to this creature, a symbol of our great country, reflects the love God shows us. God bless America, our law enforcement, and our first responders." According to Gothamist.com, the animal was brought to Raptor Trust Wild Bird Rehabilitation Center in Millington, New Jersey. The trust executive director said the eagle is still in critical condition, but did not describe the animal's injuries and is trying to get the eagle healthy enough for further treatment. Sean Marshall, NTD News.